She was 5 years old, standing over her dying mother with nothing but a stick, ready to fight any man who came close. Her father was already dead, shot by bandits who wanted money they didn't have. When Jack Mercer rode over that ridge and saw her, something inside him broke open. He was a man who hadn't let anyone close in 8 years. Not since fever took his wife and baby girl in the same week. But this child, she wasn't crying. She wasn't running. She was fighting. So Jack made a choice that would change everything. He carried them home. And when a powerful grandmother from Boston arrived with lawyers and a court order to take Emma away, Jack did the unthinkable. He asked a woman he barely knew to marry him. But here's the twist no one saw coming. To prove this wasn't about money, they had to give up $200,000, Emma's entire inheritance. Would you sacrifice a fortune to keep a family together? This is the story of two broken people who bet everything on each other, and won. Sometimes the richest life comes from giving up what the world says you should want. Real wealth isn't what you have, it's who you have to hold on to. What this story offers you: a reminder that family isn't always blood, that healing happens when we stop protecting ourselves and start protecting each other, and that one single choice, to stop, to help, to stay, can rewrite your entire future. If this story touched something in you, leave a comment and tell me, would you have given up the money? Hit like if you believe love is worth more than fortune, and subscribe so you never miss a story that proves the underdogs can win. That August sun was brutal, and at 38 years old, Jack had learned that being careful was what kept you breathing. But seeing that little girl, he spurred his horse over that dusty ridge without a second thought. What he found looked like a bad dream. A wagon was wrecked in a ditch, its contents thrown all over the dirt. But Jack's eyes were locked on the little girl. She could not have been more than 5, with a face full of grit and grime. Her dress was stained with something awful he knew all too well. She was holding that branch like a sword over her mother, who was laying on the ground, barely breathing. Jack was off his horse before it even stopped, and the girl's head whipped around. Fear flashed in her eyes, but she did not budge. She just squared her little shoulders and pointed that stick right at him, her arms shaking. "You stay back," she chirped, her voice all scratchy. "Do not you dare touch her." Jack put his hands up, slow and easy. "Take it easy, little one. I am not going to cause you any trouble." Her eyes, though, were old and full of fight. "That is what the other men said," she told him. "They just wanted water." Jack's gut clenched. He knew that story. "How long ago were they here?" She wobbled on her feet. 2 days, maybe. It is so hot." "And your pa?" The stick in her hand lowered just a bit. "They shot him." She said it plain, with no tears, the way a person does when they have seen too much. "My name is Emma," she whispered. "That is my mama, Sarah. I am Jack Mercer. My ranch is not but 5 miles from here." He took a slow step closer. "Emma, your mama is burning up with a bad fever. If we do not get her help soon, she is not going to make it. You have to let me help." She looked him up and down, sizing him up with those old eyes. Finally, that little branch dropped to the dirt. "She will not wake up," she said, her voice barely there. Jack knelt by Sarah. Her skin was fire. "You did real good, Emma," he said, and he meant it. Keeping the sun off her might have been the only thing that kept her alive this long. He knew they had to move, and fast. "We are going to my place," he told her while getting Sarah draped over his saddle. "It is not much, but it is cool and has good water." Little Emma nodded, and without being told twice, started gathering up what few things were not broken. Jack secured Sarah as best he could, then lifted the girl up behind her. "You hold on tight to my belt, you hear?" That 5-mile ride felt like 100. With every step the horse took, Jack worried it would be Sarah's last. When they finally saw his small, weathered ranch house, Jack felt like he could breathe again. He carried Sarah inside and laid her on his own bed. with Emma right on his heels like a shadow. The house was cool and dark. He tore off the dirty rags on Sarah's shoulder. The wound underneath was bad, angry and infected, just like he figured. "Emma, I'm going to need your help," Jack said, not even looking up from his work. "I need you to fetch cold water from the well outside." The little girl did not hesitate. While Jack cleaned the wound out with whiskey and packed it with a poultice he used for his animals, Emma hauled bucket after bucket of cold water. They were a team, working without a word as the sun started to set. Jack kept bathing Sarah's skin with that cold water, trying to fight the fever down. Just as the sky turned orange, he felt it. The heat was gone. Her fever had broken. He let out a long breath he did not know he was holding. He looked over and saw Emma slumped against the wall, just about asleep on her feet. He realized the poor girl had not had a bite to eat herself. He warmed up some cornbread and venison and brought a plate to her. "You have to eat something," he said softly. She took the plate, but her eyes were fixed on her mother. "Is my mama going to die?" she asked, her voice quiet. Jack looked at that tiny, serious face. He could not lie to her. "I do not know, Emma," he said honestly. "But she is a fighter, and right now, that is enough." The little girl nodded and finally took a bite of food. Jack sat down by the bed, watching Sarah breathe, hoping that fight would be enough for them all. Her little chest rose and fell, the breathing slow and steady now. That was a good sign. Emma suddenly broke the silence. "Why are you helping us?" Jack turned from the fire. "Now what kind of question is that?" "My mama always said folks don't help nobody unless they get something out of it." Her voice was flat, like she was stating a fact from a book. "So what are you getting?" "Not a thing," Jack said, taking a sip of his black coffee. "Sometimes a man helps just because it's the right thing to do." Emma's lip quivered. "Papa said that too. He said there was still good folks left." She pushed her plate away, the food barely touched. "There ain't no future now." Jack wanted to say she was wrong, but the words felt like lies in his own house. Instead, he just said, "Get some rest." Emma shook her head, her jaw set hard. "I'm not leaving her side." Jack saw a fight he couldn't win. "Fine, but you sleep. I'll keep watch." She curled up on the floor by the bed, and in minutes she was fast asleep. The prairie night settled in, and the only sounds were the crickets and the whisper of the wind. Sarah Wright would stir now and then, mumbling words that made no sense. Jack checked her fever and cleaned the wound on her shoulder. Around midnight, her eyes flew open. They darted around the unfamiliar room, wild with fear. "Emma," she gasped, trying to push herself up. "Where is my Emma?" Jack moved into the lamplight. "She's right here," he said, his voice low and calm. "She's safe. You're both safe now." Sarah's eyes found her daughter sleeping on the floor, and a wave of relief washed over her face, followed by pain. "My husband, Thomas." Her voice was a hollow whisper. "They killed him. They wanted our money, but we didn't have much." She touched her shoulder, wincing. "One of them cut me. Said it was a lesson not to waste their time." A cold, hard anger settled deep in Jack's gut. "You saved what mattered most," Jack said. "Your daughter is alive. You're alive. That's because of you." For the first time, Sarah truly looked at him. "But why? You don't even know us." It was the second time he'd been asked that tonight. Jack figured they must have come from a hard world where kindness had to have a price tag. "Like I told your little girl, it was the right thing to do." She studied his weathered face for a long moment. "Thank you," she finally whispered, her voice breaking. "You should get some rest," Jack said, feeling awkward. He turned to leave, planning to sleep in the barn. "Mr. Mercer?" He paused. "Jack," he corrected her. "The men who did this," she started. "If they come back, They won't, Jack said with a certainty that surprised even himself. And if they're fools enough to try, they'll live to regret it. He stepped out onto the porch, the door clicking softly shut. For years, he'd told himself he liked being alone out here. It was simple. It was safe. But tonight, with two strangers sleeping in his home, he felt something change inside him. The next few days fell into a quiet rhythm. Sarah's fever broke for good, and a little color returned to her cheeks. On the fourth morning, she was strong enough to join them at the kitchen table. Jack had made some Johnny cakes and salt pork. It was simple food, but she ate like it was a banquet. "You're a fine cook," she said, and the compliment caught him off guard. "It's food, that's all." Sarah offered a small, weak smile. "Everything I cooked on the trail tasted like smoke and sadness." Emma let out a little giggle, the first real happy sound Jack had heard from her. Sarah's face softened as she smoothed her daughter's hair, a gesture so full of love it made Jack turn away. After the meal, Sarah insisted on helping with the dishes. They worked side by side in a comfortable quiet, and Jack was aware of her in a way he hadn't been with anyone in a long, long time. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, stacking the last plate. "We need to move on. Find a town, get word to Thomas's family back in Ohio." Jack stopped wiping the basin. "You're in no shape to be traveling." "I can't be a burden on you forever, Jack." "You're not a burden," he said, and his voice was firm. "We need to figure out what's next. Where to go." The unspoken question hung in the air. How? Sarah's jaw tightened. "The men," she said, her voice barely audible. "They took every last cent, even the deed to the land Thomas was carrying." Jack looked at her, then at Emma, who was peering around the doorframe. "Then it's settled. You can't leave," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You can stay right here until you're ready, until you're both healed up proper." Sarah searched his face. "Why are you doing all this for us?" "I've been alone out here for 8 years," Jack said, meeting her gaze. "I chose that quiet. But choosing to be alone is a whole different thing than turning your back on folks who need help." A small smile touched Sarah's lips. "You're a stubborn man, Jack Mercer." "So I'm told." Just then, Emma came into the room holding a worn book she'd found on a shelf. "Mama, can Mr. Mercer teach me how to read this?" Sarah looked flustered. "Emma, don't you be a bother." "I'll teach her," Jack said before he even thought about it. Both of them stared at him, their eyes wide with surprise. "If your mama says it's all right," Jack added, feeling a little clumsy. "I've got the time." Emma looked at her mother with so much hope that Sarah's objections just melted away. "I promise I'll be good," Emma said, clutching the book to her chest. "Can we start right now?" "After you help me gather the eggs from the henhouse," Jack said. Emma nodded so hard her pigtails bounced, and she darted out the door. Through the window, Jack watched her run toward the chicken coop, full of more life than he'd seen in her yet. "She likes you," Sarah said quietly. "Thomas would have liked you too." Jack didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and watched the little girl who was bringing his quiet world back to life. Sarah thanked him, saying he'd given her something to hope for. Jack knew he hadn't seen her smile like that in a long, long time. Later that evening, Jack made good on his promise. He and Emma sat at the table, a pool of lamplight around them, with a worn-out old reader that had been his sister's. Emma traced the letters, sounding out the words with all her might. "Why is the K in knife so quiet?" she finally huffed, getting frustrated. "Well, little bit," Jack said with a small smile. "English is just a puzzle sometimes. You just got to remember the pieces." "That's stupid," Emma muttered. "Emma," Sarah's voice was sharp from her rocking chair. "You mind your tongue." "But it is," Emma insisted, her voice much smaller now. Jack held back a laugh. "Can't argue there, but stupid or not, it's the way it is." Emma scowled, but then read the next sentence perfectly, her face lighting up with a grin. They went on for another hour before Emma's yawns got the best of her. After Sarah tucked her in, she found Jack standing by the window, staring out into the dark. "She's finally out," Sarah said. "She's a smart girl, learns fast." "Thomas always said her education was important," Sarah said, coming to stand near him but leaving a careful space. "He had all these big plans for us." He sounded like a good man. "He was," she whispered, her reflection in the dark glass showing her wiping away a tear. "He deserved better." "Nobody deserves that," Jack said. They stood in silence for a spell. "Jack," Sarah said, turning to him, "what you're doing for us, letting us stay, teaching Emma, I know it's a lot. Sometimes a quiet life needs a little shaken up." "Even so," she insisted, "I want you to know it matters. You matter to us. I'll never forget this." "Nothing to forget," Jack said gruffly. "Now you get some rest." Sarah gave him the first real smile he'd ever seen from her, one that reached her eyes. "Good night, Jack." After she was gone, he stepped out onto the porch. The stars were scattered bright and cold across the huge Texas sky. He sank into his old weathered chair and just thought. He thought how the house wasn't empty anymore. He thought about Emma's laugh and Sarah's smile and the strange, warm feeling it gave him in his chest. He'd been alone by choice for 8 years, and he'd nearly forgotten what it felt like to be needed. He knew it was a dangerous feeling. People always leave one way or another. The smart thing to do was to help them get on their feet and send them on their way. But Jack Mercer had never been one to do the smart thing when it came to lost causes. He sat there while the moon rose, turning the whole prairie silver. The next morning, a rider came. Jack was in the barn when he heard the horse. A well-dressed man, maybe 50 years old, dismounted from a fine-looking horse that was too clean for the trail. The man had soft hands that had never seen a day of real work. Jack stepped out, his rifle held easy in his arm. "Help you with something?" The stranger smiled, a polite smile with no warmth behind it. "I'm looking for Jack Mercer. That be you?" "Depends on who's asking." "My name is Chester Whitmore. I'm an attorney from Cheyenne." The man reached into his jacket, and Jack tensed until he pulled out a card. "I represent the Caldwell family of Boston. I'm told you have information about a matter I'm looking into." Jack took the card but didn't glance at it. "Don't know any Caldwells." "Perhaps not," Whitmore said. Whitmore's eyes looked right past Jack, settling on the house. "I have a strong reason to believe you've come across a woman and child heading west. Sarah and Emma, is that right?" Every warning signal Jack had learned in his 38 years started blaring. He kept his expression smooth as glass. "What's your business with them?" "I'm afraid that is a private matter for my client." Whitmore's smile was fixed in place. "But I can promise you the Caldwell family only wants what is best for the child. You see, Emma is their granddaughter." The ground seemed to shift under Jack's feet. He turned the news over in his mind, looking for the trick in it. "That is a fact, sir. Mrs. Sarah Wright is Victoria Caldwell's daughter, though they have not spoken in years. When the family heard about the terrible thing that happened to Sarah's husband, they grew worried for their granddaughter's well-being." Whitmore produced a folded document. "This here is a court order giving the Caldwell family temporary custody until a hearing." Jack did not reach for the paper. Mighty strange they are so concerned now, after all these years of silence. Blood is thicker than water, Mr. Mercer. Surely you know that family ties run deeper than old arguments. And if the mother refuses to give up her child— Whitmore's face hardened, the professional look cracking just a bit. "Mrs. Wright cannot provide for the child. She is penniless, a widow, and hurt. The Caldwells can give Emma a good education, a safe home, and the kind of future she was born to have." "Her future," Jack said, his voice flat. "The child is set to inherit a great deal of money, Mr. Mercer. Even a man like you must see she deserves more than a life of struggle and poverty." The door creaked open, and Sarah stepped onto the porch. She was moving better each day, with less pain, but at the sight of the man, all the color washed from her face. "Chester Whitmore," she said, her voice heavy with an old fear. "I should have known Mother would send her snake." Whitmore's smile stretched wider. Sarah, it is a pleasure to see you looking so well after your troubles. What do you want here? I think you already know. He held up the court document. Your mother is ready to give Emma a proper life. All you need to do is see reason. Reason? Sarah let out a laugh with no joy in it. That is what she called it when she tried to make me marry a man of her choosing. When she disowned me for marrying Thomas. When she told me I was dead to her. She walked down the steps and Jack saw her hand was trembling. I will not let you take my daughter. I am afraid you do not have a choice in the matter. Whitmore's tone stayed polite, making his words cut deeper. The law is on our side. A mother with no money, no job, and no home is not fit to raise a child. The court will agree with the Caldwells. Emma peeked out from the doorway, her little face a mess of confusion and fright. Mama? Sarah's control finally snapped. Go back inside, darling, right now, Emma. The girl hurried back in, but Jack saw her small shadow in the window, still watching. Whitmore cleared his throat. This does not have to be difficult. The Caldwells are willing to be generous. They will pay for your doctors, give you a sum of money, and let you have supervised visits once you're back on your feet. How kind, Sarah said, her voice turning to ice. They will pay me to sell my own child, and then let me see her on their schedule. They are offering you a new beginning. Without the responsibility of a child, you could find a job, maybe even marry again. Emma is not a responsibility. Of course not. Whitmore was clearly losing his patience. But feelings aside, you have to think about what is best for her. The Caldwells have means. I know what they have, Sarah cut in. I grew up in that house. I know the kind of life Emma would have. She would be a doll in fancy dresses, taught to be quiet unless someone spoke to her. She would learn which fork was for what, and that her only value was in the man she might marry. Her voice cracked. She would learn that love comes with strings attached, and that family is just for show. I will not let that happen to her. Jack had been quiet this whole time, but now he moved, putting himself a little between Whitmore and Sarah. It sounds to me like the lady has made up her mind. Whitmore's eyes narrowed on him. And just who are you, Mr. Mercer? What is your connection to Mrs. Wright? I am the man whose land you are standing on. Ah, yes, the kind stranger. A smirk played on Whitmore's lips. Tell me, what does a man like you get for being so charitable? A lonely woman, grateful, easy to persuade. Jack's grip on his rifle tightened. You had best watch your words. I'm just saying your reasons could be questioned. A single woman living with a man who is not her husband, with no one to watch over things. It does not look right, does it? One might start to wonder about the whole situation. Sarah's face burned with shame. How dare you? I dare because I'm thinking about the child. Whitmore put the court paper back in his bag. You have 1 week to answer this, Mrs. Wright. If you fight it, we will all meet in a courtroom in Cheyenne. I suggest you think hard about the final outcome before you drag yourself and your daughter through all that trouble. He got on his horse like he had done it 1,000 times. A good day to you. They watched him ride off, kicking up a trail of dust. Sarah stood like a statue, her arms wrapped tight around herself. Jack saw her holding it all in, just like soldiers do after a fight. She did not say a word until they were alone. Sarah, do not listen to him. She held up a hand. Just stop. She walked back into the house. Through the window, Jack watched her pull Emma close, holding on as if the girl might just vanish into thin air. Jack stood on that porch for a good long while, just thinking. Then he saddled his horse and rode for town. The town of Bitter Creek was not much to look at. It was just a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, and a few other buildings for the ranchers scattered in the territory. But it had the one thing Jack needed, a telegraph office. The man inside, a skinny fella named Albert with wire glasses, looked up when Jack came in. Jack Mercer, not usual to see you in town on a weekday. I need to send a message. To where? Jack took out a piece of paper where he had written the name from Whitmore's card. Cheyenne, to the law office of Porter and Associates. Albert's eyebrows went up, but he kept his mouth shut. He wrote down Jack's message, took his money, and said he would send it right away. Jack's next stop was the land office, where he spent 20 minutes looking over property records with the clerk. Then he went to the general store, bought a few things he did not really need, and just listened to the town gossip. By the time he rode home, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky all kinds of orange and pink. Sarah was on the porch steps watching Emma play with a new kitten. "Where did you go?" Sarah asked him. "I had some business in town." Jack took his time unsaddling the horse. "I need to talk with you about something." Sarah's face fell. "If it is about what that man said, it is not." Jack led his horse to the corral and came back. "Can Emma go inside for a little while?" Sarah looked at his serious face, then called to her daughter. "Emma, honey, go on and wash up for supper." "But, Mama, now, please." Emma took the kitten and went inside. When the door shut, Sarah looked back at Jack. "What is it?" He sat on the step near her, but not too close. "I did some asking around today. Whitmore is the real deal. He works for your mother, and that court paper is legal." Sarah's shoulders slumped. "So that is it. It is over. I did not say that." Jack pulled a folded telegram from his pocket. "I also sent a wire to a lawyer in Cheyenne named Porter. He used to be a big-shot lawyer back east. He knows how these things work. Jack, I am grateful for what you are doing, but I cannot pay for a lawyer. I hardly have enough to feed Emma and myself. I did not ask you for any money." Jack handed her the paper. "Porter owes me one. He said he would take a look at your situation. For free." Sarah unfolded the reply from the lawyer. Her eyes moved over the words, then stopped and read them a second time. "He says I might have a chance. He says their case is not as strong as they pretend. They have been cut off from you. They never showed any interest in Emma before now, and their whole argument is that money matters more than a mother's love." Jack leaned against the porch post. Porter, the lawyer, laid it out plain and simple. He said judges flat out dislike wealthy people trying to buy a child no matter how they dress it up. "But the hearing's all the way in Cheyenne. How am I supposed to get there? What about Emma?" Sarah pressed her hands to her face. "This is just impossible." Jack's voice was low and steady. "Nothing's impossible, just mighty difficult." "You don't get it," she said, her voice shaking. "My mother never loses. She has spent her entire life getting exactly what she wants, and right now she wants my Emma." Sarah's eyes were bright with tears. "She'll tell them I'm an unfit mother. She'll dig up every mistake I ever made, every single reason she had to cut me off. And she'll win, she always does." "Not this time," Jack said. "How can you be so sure?" "Because this time she ain't just fighting you. You've got me standing with you." "You? Why? Why would you do all this? Risk your good name, spend your own money, get tangled up in my family's mess? What on earth for?" Jack was quiet for a long spell, just watching Emma through the window as she set the supper table. 8 years ago, I lost my wife and my little girl. A fever took 'em both inside of a week. After that, I figured I was done with family, done with caring about anyone but myself. He turned back to Sarah. "But seeing you and Emma on that plane, well, something inside me I thought was long dead and buried started to stir. Maybe it's selfish, wanting to hold on to that feeling. Or maybe I just know what it's like to lose everything. And I'll be damned if I just stand by and watch it happen to somebody else when I can do something about it." Sarah was crying for real now, tears just streaming down her face. "I don't know what to say. Don't say a thing. Just let me help." She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Okay, we'll fight this thing together." Just then, Emma opened the door, her little face all creased with worry. "Mama, are you sad?" Sarah went right to her daughter, kneeling down to look her in the eye. "No, sweetheart, Mama's not sad. I'm thankful." "For what?" "For Jack, for this place, for still having you." She cupped Emma's face in her hands. "And I'm going to make sure we stay together, no matter what happens." That night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah and Jack went over the lawyer's follow-up telegram. Porter had laid out what the Caldwells would likely argue and how Sarah could fight back. "He wants character witnesses," Sarah said, reading the paper. "Folks who can swear I'm a good mother." "I'll testify," Jack said. "They'll tear you to pieces. They'll hint at things about us, about why you're really helping. Let 'em." Jack's jaw was set like stone. "I'll just tell the truth." that I found a mother and her daughter in need of a safe place, that anyone with eyes can see that little girl is loved and cared for. It won't be enough, she whispered, not against my mother's money and her lawyers. Then we find more folks, Jack said, people in town who've seen you. The preacher. I haven't been, Sarah shook her head. We've barely left this ranch. Then we're going to change that. Jack stood up and walked to the window. Starting tomorrow, we're going to town together. We'll let people see you with Emma. We'll build a record that shows you're a strong woman doing what's best for her child. And if that's not enough, he turned back to her, then we'll find another way. We don't quit before the fight's even begun. Sarah was quiet, her fingers tracing the edge of the paper. There's something else Porter wrote at the bottom. Jack came back to the table. The last line read, "Marriage would strengthen case considerably. The court favors intact families." The words just hung there in the air between them. He's right, Sarah said softly. If I was married, my mother's whole argument would just fall apart. I wouldn't be some poor widow. I'd have a husband, a home. Sarah, I'm not suggesting... I know, she said quickly. I would never ask that of you. I just had to say it out loud, that there's a solution we ain't looking at. Jack sat down hard. It ain't that simple, I know. Marriage ought to be about love, not about some legal plan. She folded the telegram. Just forget I brought it up. But Jack couldn't forget it. The idea stuck in his mind like a burr. Marrying Sarah would fix the problem, sure, but it would change everything. His quiet life, the walls he'd built around his heart after losing his family. Still, the thought of Sarah and Emma getting dragged back to Boston, to a life that would smother them both, made something inside him rise up and roar. What if it wasn't just a legal plan, he heard himself say. Sarah's head shot up. What? Jack ran a hand through his hair, feeling like he was stepping off a cliff in the dark. What if we didn't look at it like a business deal, but as two people building something real? Jack, you don't have to do this. I know I don't have to. He leaned forward. But I've been alone for 8 long years, and I told myself that's what I wanted. Having you and Emma here these past few weeks, though, it's made me think that maybe I was just scared. Scared of losing someone again. What are you saying? I'm saying that if we're going to do this, let's do it right. Not some marriage of convenience we both end up hating, but a real partnership. I want the chance to see what we could build together, if you're willing. You hardly know me. I know you're strong. I know you'd die for Emma. I know you're stubborn, and you're kind. Jack's voice got softer. And I know that having you around feels like coming back to life after being gone for a long, long time. This is crazy, she whispered. Probably is. We should think about it. Time is the one thing we don't have. Your mother gave you a week. Jack reached across the table, his hand close to hers. I'm not asking you to love me, Sarah. I'm asking you to let me stand beside you. Let me be the wall between Emma and whatever your mother tries to pull. Let me give you both the protection of my name. And what do you get? He thought on it for a moment. A family, a second chance, a reason to care about more than just getting through the day. I'm broken, Jack. What happened with Thomas? It broke something in me. Then we'll just be broken together, he said quietly. And we'll figure it out as we go. That got a small laugh out of her, though it sounded more like a sob. Is that a yes? It's a... Sarah took a shaky breath. It's a maybe. I need to think on it. I need to pray, Emma's voice called down from the loft. Sarah stood up but looked back at Jack. Thank you, she said, for everything. He just nodded, not trusting his own voice. He sat there in the lamplight, listening to her gentle voice soothe Emma back to sleep, and wondered what in the Sam Hill he had just done. He'd offered to marry a woman he'd known for less than a month. He'd offered to jump smack into the middle of a family war against people with money and power. Any sane man would call it a fool's move. But thinking about the alternative, about watching Sarah and Emma ride away into a fight they couldn't win, being a fool felt like the only sensible choice. The next morning, Sarah came down from the loft early. She found Jack on the porch with his coffee. I have an answer, she said straight out. Jack put his cup down. All right. If we're going to do this, we do it honest. No pretending. We're partners, she said, her voice strong. Working to keep Emma safe and build a life that's good for all of us. If something more grows out of that, then it's a blessing. Then that settles it. I need you to know what you are getting into, though. My mother is not going to give up on this custody fight. She will try to break you down, ruin your good name, and make your life a living hell. Let her try. A small smile touched Sarah's lips. She does not know me. Jack stood up. So, we have a deal? Yes, we do. She offered her hand. Partners? He took it, feeling the warmth of her skin. Partners. They shook on it like a business deal, but Jack saw a flicker of hope in her eyes, both fragile and fierce. When? Sarah asked. As soon as I can arrange it. I will ride to town today and speak with the minister. Jack, are you certain about this? He was not certain at all, but he said yes, with enough conviction to make it so. 3 days later, Jack stood before a cracked mirror, fighting with a tie he had not worn in 8 years. His hands struggled with the unfamiliar knot. The suit felt tight across his shoulders, broadened by years of ranch work. Through the wall, he heard Sarah and Emma. The girls' happy chatter was a sound that had quickly become familiar. Jack felt a knot in his stomach he could not quite name. It was a mix of hope and fear. A knock on the door made him turn. Sarah was standing there in a simple blue dress with little flowers at the collar. He knew she must have made it herself from leftover cloth. Her hair was pinned up, showing the lovely curve of her neck. For a second, Jack forgot to breathe. You look scared to death, Sarah said, with a hint of a smile. I look like a man who cannot tie his own tie. She walked over and fixed it for him. Her touch was gentle and sure. Jack stood perfectly still, noticing the faint smell of lavender soap. There, she said, stepping away. You look presentable. You look, Jack began, searching for the right word. Beautiful. A blush colored Sarah's cheeks. Thank you. Emma helped me with the buttons. My shoulder is still sore. She paused. I am nervous. Me too. What if this is a terrible mistake? The question hung in the air between them. He could have given her easy reassurances, but he chose the truth instead. Maybe it is. But it is our mistake to make for all the right reasons. Sarah nodded slowly. Emma keeps asking if you are going to be her papa now. What did you say to her? That you will be her stepfather? That you care for her and want to keep her safe? Sarah's voice trembled just a little. She asked if that meant you loved us. Jack's chest felt tight. What did you tell her? I told her that love shows itself in different ways, and that the people who stand by you when things get hard are the ones who truly matter. She looked right at him. Was that okay to say? That was perfect. Emma shouted from the other room, impatient to leave. Sarah gave Jack's arm a quick touch before turning to go. We ought to get moving. Reverend Collins is waiting. The wagon ride into town was quiet. Emma sat between them, humming to herself, not understanding the weight of the day. The heat was heavy, and dust billowed up behind them. Bitter Creek looked the same as always, just a few buildings under a big, hot sun. But today, the town felt different to Jack. This was where his life was about to change for good. Reverend Collins, his wife Martha, and Albert from the telegraph office were waiting at the church. Jack had asked Albert to be a witness. It was a desperate plan, born from the meanest kind of injustice. A good woman, Sarah, and her little girl, Emma, were about to be ripped apart by a powerful family with money and no heart. That's when Jack, a quiet rancher who kept to himself, made an offer that was pure Texas grit, a marriage of convenience. This story is about how a real family is something you build, not just something you are born into. If you believe in the underdog, then you need to hear what happened next. The wedding itself was a quiet affair in Reverend Collins's small office. No fancy decorations, just two folks making a stand. When the Reverend said, "You may kiss your bride," the air turned thick with awkwardness. Jack leaned in and gave Sarah a brief, formal kiss. But even that simple touch felt like a lightning strike, a sudden reminder that this was real. Their lives were now tied together for better or worse. Emma, bless her heart, ran to them the second they parted, wrapping her arms around them both. "We're a family now," she declared. And over her head, Jack and Sarah shared a look filled with hope and a whole lot of fear. They signed the papers with their friends, Albert and Martha, as witnesses. Just as they were heading back to the wagon, a man who looked like trouble in a fancy suit got off his horse. It was Chester Whitmore, the lawyer for the folks trying to take Emma. "Mrs. Mercer now, is it?" he sneered. "How convenient." Jack stepped right in front of Sarah, shielding her. "This marriage won't change a thing," Whitmore said, his smile all sharp edges. "The Caldwells will just say this proves her desperation." "I am not a stranger," Jack said, his voice low and steady. "I am her husband, and I am Emma's legal guardian now." Whitmore just laughed and handed them a notice. "The hearing is in 2 weeks. I do look forward to it." He tipped his hat like a gentleman, but his eyes were cold as a snake's. He walked away, leaving a bad feeling hanging in the dusty air. On the ride back to the ranch, things were quiet. Emma fell asleep, worn out from all the excitement. Sarah stared out at the flat Texas plains, her face impossible to read. "You all right?" Jack asked gently. "I keep waiting to feel different," she confessed. "We just got married. I thought maybe there would be lightning and thunder or something." Jack thought for a moment. "My first marriage, it felt like that. This is different, but that does not mean it is wrong." "What if we cannot make this work?" she whispered. Jack looked at her, his hands firm on the reins. "Then we'll fail together instead of apart. That has to count for something." Sarah almost smiled at that. Back at the ranch, after the chores were done, the three of them sat down for a simple supper of beans and cornbread. The little house was quiet, but it was a comfortable silence. Emma, sitting beside Jack, looked up at him with her big, serious eyes. "Papa Jack," she said, trying out the name. The word hung in the air, and you could see the weight of it land on both Jack and Sarah. "You can just call me Jack," he told her gently. "Or Papa, if you want, only if it feels right." Emma nodded. "Mama says you are going to keep us safe now." "That is the plan," Jack said, his voice softer than usual. "We are a family now, and families protect each other." Later that night, Jack found himself in the barn, watching Emma play with a litter of new kittens. He was married to a woman he barely knew, with a daughter who was not his, and a court battle just down the road. By any sensible measure, he had lost his mind. But as he watched that little girl's face light up with pure joy, Jack knew he did not regret a single bit of it. Does that sound silly? No, it sounds true. Jack steered the team around a rut in the road. "My first marriage, I was walking on air for weeks. This is different, but different is not the same as wrong. What if we fail? Then we will fail standing together instead of apart. That has to be worth something." Sarah almost smiled. "You are not very good at romantic speeches." "Never said I was." The silence that followed was more comfortable. Back at the ranch, Jack unhitched the team while Sarah took a sleepy Emma inside. By the time he finished the chores, lamplight was glowing from the windows. He found Sarah in the kitchen, mixing up cornbread batter while Emma set the table. The scene felt surprisingly natural. "Supper will be ready in a bit," Sarah said. "I hope beans and cornbread are all right." Jack sat down with a cup of coffee. "You do not ever have to apologize for the food here, Sarah." She just nodded. Emma came over and leaned against his arm. "Papa Jack," she whispered. His breath caught in his throat. "You can call me Jack," he said softly, "or Papa, if that is what you want." Emma thought about that for a moment. "Mama says you will keep us safe now, that the bad people cannot get me." "That is right, because we are a family now, and a family looks out for its own." That answer seemed to please her. She went back to her chore, and Jack and Sarah shared a look. They both understood the weight of a promise made to a child. Dinner was a simple, quiet meal. Afterward, Sarah cleaned up while Jack took Emma out to the barn to see the new kittens. The night air was finally cooling off and stars were popping out in the dark sky. Emma ran ahead, her tiredness gone. Jack followed, thinking about the day's events. He was a married man again, married to a woman he hardly knew, with a daughter and a court fight ahead of him. By all accounts, he had lost his mind. But as he watched Emma holding a tiny kitten, her face lit with joy, he found he had no regrets. Sarah came to the barn door. "It is getting late, Emma. Time for bed." "Just 5 more minutes? You said that 10 minutes ago." Sarah's voice was soft. "Come on now, sweetheart. The kittens are tired too." Emma gave the kitten back to its mother and headed for the house. Sarah watched her go, then looked at Jack. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. You already did." "I know, but I have to say it again," she said, stepping a little closer. "I know this is not the life you planned for yourself." "They are my battles now, too," Jack said. "That is what we promised." Her eyes shone in the lantern light. "I will do my best to be a good wife. I know I am not Anne, but I will try to be—" "Do not." Jack's voice was gruff. "Do not try to be anybody else. You are enough." "Is it?" He wanted to give her an easy yes, but he owed her the truth. "I do not know yet, but we are going to find out together." She nodded, accepting it. "I should put Emma to bed." She paused at the door. "Jack, where will you be sleeping tonight?" The question brought them back to reality. The small house had only one bed. "The barn is fine," Jack said quickly. "It is fine until we figure things out. Figure it all out." A mix of relief and maybe a little disappointment crossed Sarah's face. "Are you certain?" "I am. Now go on. Get Emma tucked in for the night." He watched her head back to the house, her shape lit up for a moment by the lamp before the door shut. That left him alone in the barn with the quiet horses, the sound of kittens, and the heavy weight of what he had just done. Jack laid out his bedroll in the empty stall he'd been using. The straw wasn't much for comfort, and through the cracks in the barn walls he could see the lights in the house. He pictured Sarah moving inside, putting Emma to bed, getting ready for sleep herself. His wife. The word still felt like a suit of clothes that didn't quite fit him. It took a long while for sleep to find him. When it did, he dreamed of Anne and Lily, their faces fading out like fog in the morning sun. In their place were new faces, ones that were starting to feel like home. He woke up before the sun with a dull ache in his chest, not sure if it was grief or maybe a little bit of hope. The next week settled into a new kind of rhythm. The days were for ranch work and getting ready for the hearing. Jack started teaching Emma her letters while Sarah practiced her testimony with a hard-set jaw. In the evenings, they'd sit together, slowly learning how to be this new family they were building. Sarah was a natural, taking over the house with a quiet competence. She learned Jack liked his coffee strong and his eggs over easy. She knew when to talk and when to just let him be with his thoughts. In turn, Jack fixed the old rocking chair she liked, made the loft ladder sturdier so Emma wouldn't fall, and brought her bunches of bluebonnets he found out on the plains. They were polite with each other, almost too polite. They never touched unless they had to. They didn't talk about anything deeper than the weather or what chore needed doing next. It was safe and it was comfortable, but it was also lonely in a way Jack hadn't counted on. 6 days after they married, a second letter came from Whitmore. This one had a colder edge to it. The Caldwells had hired another lawyer and were ready to argue the marriage was just a sham to get around their claim on Emma. They planned on calling people to talk about Jack's character, or what they saw as his lack of it. Sarah read the letter twice, her hands trembling. "They're going to ruin us." "They're sure going to try," Jack said, taking the letter and tossing it into the fireplace. "We've got the truth on our side. The truth doesn't always win. Then we'll just have to make sure it does." Emma was in town with the preacher's wife, learning to sew, so they were alone. Sarah started pacing the small house like a spooked horse in a tight pen. Her worry was so thick you could feel it in the air. "I can't lose her, Jack. I just can't." Her voice cracked. "She's all I have left of Thomas. They won't take her." "You can't promise that." I can promise I will fight like the devil to stop them. Jack put a gentle hand on her arm, stopping her pacing. Sarah, look at me. She did, her eyes wide with fear. We are going to win this, Jack said, with more conviction than he really felt. But if something goes wrong, if the worst happens, we don't just give up. We find another way. We keep fighting till there's no fight left. Why are you doing all this? The question was a whisper. Why do you care so much? Because somewhere in these last few weeks, you and Emma stopped being folks I was helping and started feeling like mine, Jack thought. Because the first thing I think of when I wake up is making sure you two are safe. Because for the first time in 8 long years, I've got something worth fighting for. But he didn't say any of that. He just said, because it's the right thing to do. Sarah looked deep into his eyes, searching for something. Then she did something that surprised him. She stepped right up and wrapped her arms around his waist, burying her face in his chest. Jack went stiff as a board. He couldn't recall the last time someone had hugged him, the last time he'd let anyone get that close. Slowly, almost painfully, he raised his arms and held her back. Sarah was shaking with quiet sobs. Jack just held on, rubbing her back in clumsy circles, the way he used to with Lily when she had a bad dream. It felt strange and right all at once, having this woman crying in his arms. When she finally quieted down, Sarah pulled away, wiping her face. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Don't you be sorry. I'm not usually so. She trailed off. You're scared. You've got every right to be. Sarah gave him a weak, watery smile. You are a good man, Jack Mercer. Before Jack could think of what to say, they heard a wagon roll up. Sarah pulled herself together in an instant, fixing her hair and her dress. By the time Martha Collins brought Emma inside, the only sign of the storm was the slight redness around Sarah's eyes. That night, lying out in the barn, Jack kept playing that moment over in his head. The feel of Sarah in his arms, the trust she'd shown him. He realized his reasons had changed. This wasn't just about duty anymore, it was something a whole lot more complicated. He was in deep trouble. He knew it. He'd married Sarah Wright to keep her and Emma safe from a legal fight. It was a practical solution to a big problem. He'd gone into it thinking they might just be polite strangers living under the same roof. But lying there in the dark, Jack had to admit the truth, at least to himself. He was starting to care for her, really care. And that made him feel a kind of vulnerability he hadn't felt in a long, long time. The hearing was in 8 days. The courthouse in Cheyenne was a big brick building meant to make a man feel small. Jack felt it the second they walked through the heavy oak doors. Sarah's hand was trembling on his arm, and Emma walked between them, holding tight to a little cloth doll. They had left the ranch before sunrise to make the long trip. Sarah looked tired with dark circles under her eyes. She had on the same blue dress from their wedding day, and Jack wore his suit again, the tie feeling tight around his neck. Their lawyer, Porter, met them in the hall. He was a younger man than Jack figured, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and a restless energy about him. He gave Jack a firm handshake, then smiled at Sarah. Mrs. Mercer, I've gone over everything their lawyer filed. Their whole case is smoke and mirrors, not facts. He crouched down to Emma's level. And you must be Miss Emma. I'm Mr. Porter, and I'm going to help make sure you stay with your mama and Jack. Emma looked at him with serious eyes. Are you going to stop the mean people? I'm surely going to try my best, Porter said, leading them to a small waiting room. Jack could hear the courtroom filling up on the other side of the door. The sound of shuffling chairs and low voices made his stomach clench. It was the same feeling he used to get before a battle, thinking of all the ways things could go wrong. The judge is Harold Morrison, Porter told them, looking at his notes. He's a fair man, but he's old-fashioned. He likes order and tradition. The Caldwells are going to play right into that. So what do we do? Sarah asked, her voice stretched thin. We tell the truth, Porter said. That Emma has a loving mother who's done everything for her. That she has a stepfather ready to provide for them. That this family even if it started out unusual, is a real one. Porter looked straight at Jack. They will attack your marriage. They'll question why you did it. You have to be ready. I am, Jack said. Are you? Porter's eyes were steady. Their lawyer, Whitmore, is slick. He'll try to get you angry, try to twist your words. He'll paint you as a scoundrel or a fool. Can you keep your head? Jack thought about the war, about burying his wife and daughter in the same week. I can handle anything he's got. A bailiff stuck his head in the door. Judge Morrison is ready for you. The courtroom was smaller than Jack thought it would be, but it was packed full. He saw a few familiar faces from town. Reverend Collins gave him a nod from the back row. Across the room sat a woman who could only be Victoria Caldwell. She was in her 60s, wearing expensive black silk that likely cost more than Jack made in a whole year. Diamonds sparkled around her neck, but her face was cold as ice as she stared down her own daughter. Sarah went stiff as a board beside Jack. He covered her hand with his, a quiet reminder that she wasn't by herself in this. The bailiff's voice boomed, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Harold Morrison." The judge was a stern-faced man who looked like he'd seen it all. "Be seated," he said, his voice dry. "We are here to consider a petition for custody of the child, Emma Wright, filed by Mr. and Mrs. Edward Caldwell. Mr. Whitmore, you may begin." Whitmore stood, looking polished and slick. "Your Honor, this is a simple case about what is best for a child. Emma Wright's grandparents are upstanding citizens who can give her every advantage. Her mother, while meaning well, is a penniless widow." Porter Rose, their lawyer, stood up next. "Your Honor, the respondent is no longer a penniless widow. She is Mrs. Sarah Mercer, wife of Jack Mercer, a respected rancher. She has a stable home and is the mother who has loved and cared for this child her whole life. The Caldwells' sudden interest after years of being estranged is something worth looking at." The judge made a note. "Mr. Whitmore, call your first witness." Victoria Caldwell walked to the stand like she owned the room. Whitmore asked her, "Mrs. Caldwell, can you describe your relationship with your daughter, Sarah?" "I gave her life," Victoria said, her voice cool and sharp. "I gave her everything. She chose to throw it away on a man I considered unsuitable, Thomas Wright, a man with no prospects and no family to speak of." Victoria Caldwell sat on the witness stand, looking down her nose at her own daughter. She told the court how she had warned Sarah not to marry Thomas Wright. When asked if she helped her daughter after the wedding, her answer was cold as a stone. She said Sarah made her choice, and that choice meant living without family support. Victoria claimed she only learned of Thomas's death recently after hiring a man to find Sarah. She spoke of her horror at finding her granddaughter Emma living on a rustic ranch with a stranger. Victoria insisted her only concern was for the child's welfare. She told the judge that Emma deserved a proper education and a stable future, not a rough life in the middle of nowhere. Beside Jack, Sarah was trembling, her face pale as a sheet. Victoria finished by saying her daughter showed the same poor judgment now as she had years ago, rushing into a new marriage with a man she barely knew. Victoria looked around the courtroom, trying to appear loving. She said that love did not make her blind to Sarah's failures, and that Emma deserved better. Then Sarah's lawyer, Porter, stood up. His friendly manner was gone, replaced by a sharp edge. He asked Victoria if cutting off her 20-year-old daughter was her idea of love. Victoria stiffened, saying Sarah had a husband. Porter pressed on, asking why, after Thomas died and Sarah was hurt, she sent a hired man instead of going herself. Victoria faltered, claiming she needed to understand the situation first. But Porter had a surprise. He pulled out a copy of her late husband's will. It turned out that a trust fund of $200,000 was left to his only grandchild, Emma. The courtroom started buzzing. Porter looked right at Victoria and said this fight was not about love, but about controlling that money. Victoria snapped that his claim was absurd, but her face showed her anger. The judge allowed the will as evidence, and Victoria had to step down. Sarah cried quietly while Jack sat beside her, wanting to hold her hand, but knowing all eyes were on them. The court then heard from a Boston socialite who praised Victoria, but admitted she had never even met Sarah or Emma. Next, a doctor spoke about the dangers of frontier life, but Porter made him admit he had never traveled west of Pennsylvania. By the time the judge called for a lunch break, the case built by the Caldwells seemed strong, but it was based on opinions, not facts. At a small restaurant, nobody felt much like eating. Sarah barely touched her food. Jack tried to reassure her, saying Porter was doing a fine job taking apart their arguments. But Sarah felt hopeless. She said her mother truly believes she is saving Emma, and the judge kept looking at her like she was a criminal. She whispered that maybe she should just give in and let her parents have a role in Emma's life if it would stop the fight. Jack gently took her hands. He told her to look at him, and through her tired red eyes, she did. He said they were not giving up, not now, not ever. They were not going to lose this fight. Emma, sensing her mother's sadness, tugged on her sleeve. Sarah pulled her daughter into a hug, promising that everything would be all right. That afternoon, Porter called his own witnesses. Reverend Collins spoke of Sarah's good character and how much she loved her daughter. His wife, Martha, described how well cared for and happy Emma was. Then Albert from the telegraph office testified that Jack was a good, honest man. Each person helped paint a truer picture, but the judge's face gave nothing away. Finally, it was Sarah's turn. She walked to the stand with her head held high. Her voice was steady as she swore the oath. Porter asked her to describe her relationship with Emma. Sarah said her daughter was her whole world, and that she had always done everything in her power to keep her safe and loved. She explained how she survived for 3 days in the wilderness after the attack, all for Emma. Her voice grew stronger as she said she would have died before letting anything happen to her child. Then Porter asked why she married Jack. Sarah took a moment, looking across the room to meet Jack's eyes. She admitted that at first it was a practical decision to protect Emma from a custody battle. But then she spoke of Jack's kindness. He had saved their lives and asked for nothing. He taught Emma to read and made them both feel safe. She said she married him for practical reasons, yes, but also because he was a good man who cared for them. The other lawyer stood up, his voice dripping with scorn. He accused her of poor judgment and asked if she would discard this marriage as easily as she entered it. Then came the final, cruel question. You do not even love him, do you? Sarah's eyes found Jack's again. A long silence filled the room. Then a small, sure smile touched her lips. At first, I was not sure, she said, her voice clear and strong. But sitting here today, I am certain. Yes, I love him very much. The judge looked from Victoria's shocked face to the truth shining between Sarah and Jack. He cleared his throat and declared that Emma would remain with her mother. He added that family is built on love and sacrifice, not on money and control. Outside, Jack pulled Sarah into his arms, and their new life as a true family finally began. An understanding? I didn't say I don't love him, Sarah said, her voice low. I just said it started out as a practical thing. Whitmore's smile was just plain cruel. How mighty convenient for you. You find love just in time for this hearing. Porter shot up from his chair. Objection. He is pestering the witness. Sustained. Mr. Whitmore, you need to move on. But that lawyer had already done his damage. He kept on, chipping away at Sarah's choices, her good name, and her ability to raise Emma all on her own. By the time he was through, Sarah looked like she was about to fall to pieces. Then, Porter called his last witness. The respondent calls Jack Mercer. Jack's legs felt like jelly walking to that stand. He had stared down men with guns and seen things that would break most folks. But standing there with everything riding on his next words was the scariest thing he had ever done. Porter asked him straight. Jack told them how he found Sarah and Emma and how he tended to Sarah's wounds. He spoke plainly, just the facts. Why did you marry her? Porter asked. Because it was the right thing to do. Emma deserved her mama, and I could help make that happen. Do you regret it now? Jack thought about Sarah's tears. About little Emma calling him Papa Jack. About how the house just felt warmer with them there. No, sir. I surely do not. If the court gives custody to the Caldwells, what are you going to do? Whatever it takes to get her back. I will not stop fighting. Whitmore circled in for his questions, looking like a coyote sizing up a rabbit. Mr. Mercer, you are a rancher. How much profit did you clear last year? About $600 after I paid my bills. $600. And the Caldwells are offering a trust fund of $200,000. Can you honestly say you can provide for her better? Money is not everything. That is easy to say when you do not have it. Tell me, Mr. Mercer, how long were you alone on that ranch before Sarah and Emma showed up? 8 years. 8 years. All by yourself. No wife, no family. Then a beautiful woman appears, hurt and thankful, and you marry her in just a few weeks. Is it not true you took advantage of her situation? No, sir. You want this court to believe a man who has been alone for 8 years acted purely out of the goodness of his heart? Jack felt his temper rise, but he pushed it down. I expect the court to believe I saw people who needed help, and I helped them. That is what decent folks do. Or maybe you saw a woman whose daughter had a big inheritance. That is a lie, Jack said, his voice flat. Is it? Because it looks to me like you have set yourself up mighty fine. You are married to a woman with nowhere else to go. Whitmore leaned in close. How long do you reckon this marriage will last once Sarah does not need you to protect her anymore? Jack looked that lawyer square in the eye. Long enough to prove you wrong. A few folks in the back chuckled. Whitmore's jaw got tight, but he kept at it for another 20 minutes trying to poke a hole in Jack's story. But Jack stood his ground, answering every question with simple honesty. Finally, Judge Morrison called a stop to it. I have heard enough. The judge looked over at the lawyers. Your Honor, Porter said, the truth is clear. Emma is loved, and she is safe with her mother. The Caldwells are just after that child's inheritance. Whitmore gave his own speech painting the Caldwells as loving grandparents, and Jack as a man looking for a payday. When they were both done, Judge Morrison took off his glasses and cleaned them real slow. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. This is a tough one. On one side, we got grandparents with a lot of money. On the other, we have a mother who clearly loves her little girl. He put his glasses back on. But one thing bothers me, and it bothers me a whole lot. That trust fund. Victoria Caldwell's face turned to stone. Mr. Whitmore claims the money does not matter. But I find that hard to swallow, seeing as how they never once visited Emma until after her daddy passed away. The law is here to protect children, not to make their guardians rich. Hope started to bubble up in Jack's chest. But, the judge went on, I am also concerned about this marriage. It happened awful fast. That hope died right down. So, I am going to do something a little unusual. Judge Morrison looked straight at Jack and Sarah. I'm going to ask you to do something to settle my doubts once and for all. What is that, Your Honor? Jack asked, his heart pounding. I want you to officially give up Emma's inheritance. The room exploded. Victoria Caldwell jumped up, her face all twisted in rage. Whitmore was shouting objections. Sarah just sat there, pale as a ghost. The judge banged his gavel. Order! Order in this court! When things quieted down, he explained. If Mr. and Mrs. Mercer are willing to sign papers so the money goes back to the Caldwell estate, then the main reason for this fight is gone. The Caldwells will have no money to gain, and I can rule based on what is truly best for the child. Your Honor, you cannot ask them to give up $200,000, Whitmore yelled. I am not asking. I am giving them a choice, the judge said, his eyes steady. If their marriage is real and they truly want what is best for Emma, they will agree. If not, well, that tells me everything. Porter leaned over to whisper, You do not have to do this. We can appeal. No. Sarah's voice was as clear and strong as a church bell. We will do it. Sarah. That is Emma's future, Jack whispered. Her future is with us, not with a pile of money. Sarah stood up. Your Honor, we agree. We will sign whatever you need. Jack stood right up beside her. Both of us. Judge Morrison almost smiled. Very well. Court is adjourned until tomorrow morning. Victoria Caldwell swept past them like a cold northern wind, her face a mask of pure fury. Her lawyer, Whitmore, hurried right behind her, already whispering in her ear. Sarah sagged against Jack, and he held her steady. Emma ran to them, wrapping her small arms around them both. "Is it over?" she asked. "Can we go home now?" "Not just yet, darling," Sarah told her softly. "But soon. Real soon." Their lawyer, Porter, just stood there shaking his head. "I still cannot believe y'all just gave away $200,000. "We did not give away a thing," Jack said, his voice firm. "We just chose what matters." That night, Sarah stood by the hotel window, just staring into the dark. Jack came and stood beside her. "You all right?" "I just signed away my little girl's future." "No," he said gently. "You made sure she has one." She turned to face him. "But what if the judge still rules against us?" "Then we will figure out what comes next. Together." "Together," she whispered and reached out for his hand. "Jack, what I said in there. About our marriage. I meant every single word. I know this started as a practical arrangement, but somewhere down the line it became real. You became the person I cannot imagine my life without." Jack felt his throat tighten. "Sarah, you do not have to say that. I know you married me out of kindness to do the right thing." "But I need you to know," she insisted, squeezing his fingers. "For me, it is more than that now. I care about you, Jack. Deeply." He looked down at their joined hands. This woman had walked into the worst time of his life and somehow made it better just by being there. "I care about you too, both of you, more than I ever thought I could care about anything again." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. "Really?" He pulled her into his arms. "Really. I do not know what tomorrow will bring, but I know I want to face it with you." They stood like that for a long time, two broken people finding strength in their shared fight to protect the family they had built. Morning came too slow, and then all at once. Jack slipped out of bed and found Emma already sitting by the window, holding her doll. The early light caught in her blonde hair, making her look so impossibly small. "Morning, Papa Jack," she whispered. That name still hit him right in the chest, a feeling both warm and a little frightening. "Morning, Emma." "I dreamed about the bad lady, the one who looks like Mama but is not nice." Jack sat beside her, trying to find the right words. "Your grandmother's not bad exactly. She's just confused about what is important. Mama said she wanted to take me away." "She did," he said. "But that is not going to happen. Your Mama and I will not let it. You are ours, Emma, and that is not changing." The little girl seemed satisfied with that, climbing into his lap as the sun rose over Cheyenne. An hour later, they dressed in a tense silence. The papers they had signed sat on the dresser, giving up all claim to that $200,000. "No regrets?" Jack asked as Sarah put up her hair. She met his eyes in the mirror. "Only that it came to this. I would give up 10 times that amount to keep her safe." Breakfast in the hotel dining room was a quiet affair. No one could eat much. The walk to the courthouse felt like a funeral march. Reporters were already gathering, ready for the next piece of drama. Victoria Caldwell arrived in a fancy black carriage and swept past them without a single glance, her face a mask of cold anger. Inside, the courtroom was packed, every seat taken, with people standing along the walls. The air was thick with the summer heat, and everyone's anticipation. Porter met them at their table, his face carefully neutral. "The documents are filed. Judge Morrison has them. Now we wait." They did not have to wait long. At precisely 9 o'clock, Judge Morrison entered. He settled in his chair and looked over the crowded room. "I have reviewed the documents," he began, his voice cutting through the quiet. Mr. and Mrs. Mercer have legally and irrevocably renounced any claim Emma Wright might have to the Caldwell Trust Fund. The money will return to the estate. Victoria Caldwell sat stiff as a board, her hands clenched in her lap. This action clarifies the situation a great deal, the judge continued. It demonstrates that Mr. and Mrs. Mercer's interest in the child is genuine and not motivated by money. It also removes the primary reason for the Caldwells' custody petition. A small flame of hope flickered in Jack's chest. However, the judge paused and the flame wavered. I still have concerns about the hasty nature of the Mercers' marriage. Porter started to rise, but the judge waved him down. Custody of Emma Wright will remain with her mother, Sarah Mercer. However, the court will appoint a monitor to check on the child's welfare every 3 months for the next year. If at any time that monitor finds Emma is being neglected, the Caldwells may refile their petition. It was not a complete victory, but it was enough. Sarah's hand found Jack's under the table. Then the judge turned his hard gaze directly on Victoria. Madam, you came to this court claiming to be concerned for your granddaughter, but your actions suggest your concern was mainly financial. You abandoned your daughter, showed no interest in this child until money was involved, and were willing to traumatize her to get your hands on it. I find your behavior reprehensible. The judge's disgust was clear in his voice. Should you attempt to contact Emma or the Mercers in any way beyond what is strictly necessary, I will consider it harassment and will act accordingly. Do I make myself clear? Victoria's face was white with rage. Perfectly clear, Your Honor. Good. This matter is concluded. Judge Morrison banged his gavel. The courtroom erupted into noise as reporters rushed toward them. Jack pulled Sarah and Emma close, shielding them. Porter was grinning widely. We won. Not perfectly, but we won. Thank you, Sarah said, tears of relief streaming down her face. Thank yourselves, Porter told them, shaking Jack's hand. Giving up that money is what tipped the scales. You are a good man, Mercer. Take care of them. I will. They pushed through the crowd and out into the bright summer morning. The heat hit them like a physical wall. But Jack had never felt more welcome. Emma was theirs. Emma looked up at Sarah, confused by the tears. Mama, why are you crying? Because I am happy, sweetheart, she said, her voice thick with emotion. So happy. We can go home now. Home. The word felt like a cool drink of water after a long, hard day. Yes, he thought. Let us go home. The ride back to the ranch took all day, but nobody seemed to mind one bit. Emma was chattering away, her fears all forgotten. Sarah sat close to Jack, their shoulders touching. Every now and then she would look at him in a way that made his heart do a little flip. They got there just as the sun was setting, painting the whole sky in reds and golds. The little house looked weathered against the big Wyoming sky, but it had never looked better to Jack. He helped them down from the wagon and just stood there for a minute. This place, which had been his prison for 8 long years, felt different now. It felt full. It felt alive. It felt like home. Jack. Sarah was on the porch. You coming? She walked back down to stand beside him. What are you thinking about? That everything is different now. Is that a bad thing? No. Jack turned to her. It is the best thing that has ever happened to me. Sarah gave him the first real, unguarded smile he had ever seen. We need to talk about what we are to each other now. I know what we are, Jack said. We are married. We are Emma's folks. But are we? Sarah paused. Are we really husband and wife, or just 2 people sharing a roof? Jack thought on it. About the long weeks with Sarah crying in his arms and little Emma calling him Papa Jack. He thought about that tight feeling in his chest whenever Sarah smiled, and how the whole house felt hollow when she was gone. He remembered standing in that courtroom, ready to give up everything just to keep them safe. I don't rightly know how to do this, he admitted. I don't know how to be a husband again. How to let somebody in after so long of keeping the world out. But I know I want to try with you. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. I want to try too. I'm scared, Jack. I'm terrified of getting hurt again, of losing someone else. But I'm more scared of not taking this chance. Then we'll be scared together. She let out a small laugh through her tears. That's our way, ain't it? Doing everything half terrified and half hopeful. Jack reached up and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. Sarah, I'm not a man of fancy words, but I can promise you this: I will be here every single day. I'll work to make this a real marriage, to be the man this family needs. I will choose you and Emma every day for the rest of my life. That's all I need, Sarah whispered. Just you being here. She moved closer, and the kiss they shared wasn't like at the wedding. This one was real and soft and full of tomorrow. His hands cupped her face and her fingers clutched his shirt. For a second, the world was just the two of them and the fragile, beautiful thing they were building. When they broke apart, a little out of breath, Emma's voice piped up from the doorway. Does this mean y'all love each other now? Sarah laughed, turning to her daughter. Yes, honey, I think it does. Good, Emma said with a grin. Y'all were being too careful. It was weird. Jack had to smile at that. From the mouths of babes. Come on, Sarah said, taking his hand. Let's go inside. I'll get supper started and we can figure out what's next. What came next was simpler than he'd figured. The court's monitor, a stern woman named Mrs. Patterson, showed up 3 months later. She looked over the house, talked to Emma, and asked some hard questions. She left satisfied, writing a report about a happy child in a loving home. After her fourth and final visit, she told them the court saw no more reason to keep watch. The Mercers were finally on their own. Life found a new rhythm. Sarah took charge of the house, turning it from a bachelor's rough place into a real home. Curtains went up, quilts appeared on the bed, and herbs started drying in the kitchen. She put in a garden that grew like a weed, blessing them with fresh vegetables. Emma just bloomed. She grew taller and healthier, with a new confidence about her. Jack taught her to ride, and she took to it like a natural. Sarah taught her to sew and cook. Together, they gave her an education of books and common sense, and they watched a scared little thing turn into a bright young lady with her own dreams. Their marriage grew slow and steady. Sarah moved her things into Jack's room, and they learned about each other piece by piece. They figured out how to share a space, how to talk through a disagreement, and how to lean on each other when the hard days came. Some nights, nightmares of the attack would wake Sarah up screaming, and Jack would just hold her till they passed. Other nights, Jack would lie awake thinking of Anne and Lily, and Sarah would just lay her hand on his chest, a quiet promise that he wasn't alone. Love came when it was ready, natural as breathing. It wasn't the fiery romance he once knew, but something deeper. It was a partnership built on respect and a quiet affection that got stronger every day. 2 years after the court date, on a warm summer evening, Sarah stood on the porch watching Emma playing with a new batch of kittens. Some folks get a raw deal in life, and Jack Mercer was one of them. He had lost everything. Sarah, his new wife, had a mother who tried to tear her family apart. But this story is about how 2 broken souls in Wyoming could build a new life from the ashes. It shows that what matters is not what you have lost, but what you build next. Jack watched Sarah on the porch, her hands on her belly, looking as peaceful as a Sunday morning. He wrapped his arms around her. The baby was kicking up a storm. They talked about names, deciding to honor the spouses they had both lost. Anne-Marie for a girl, Thomas Jack for a boy. Sarah's eyes welled up. She was moved he would honor her first husband that way. Jack held her face. He said, we do not have to forget them, to build something new. They are part of what made us who we are. That is when little Emma came running up, clutching a tiny kitten and begging to keep it. Jack agreed, feeling whole for the first time in forever. Just then, a rider appeared on the horizon. It was Albert from town, and he was carrying a letter from Boston. Jack's jaw tightened when he saw the fancy seal from the Caldwell family. It was from Sarah's mother, Victoria. He looked at Sarah, who just nodded. She was ready to hear it. He read the letter out loud. Victoria wrote that she still believed she was right about Emma, but that report said the child was happy and healthy. She said she would not trouble them anymore. She only asked that when Emma was older, she be allowed to choose for herself if she wanted to know her grandmother. Sarah was quiet for a spell. Bless her heart, Jack thought. She can't even say she was wrong. But they knew it was the closest thing to an apology they would ever get. Sarah decided to keep the letter for Emma. She said one day, when she is old enough, the girl can make her own choice. It would be her decision, not anyone else's. Jack knew then he had chosen well. They were two broken people who had found their strength in each other. As the seasons turned, their life on the ranch blossomed. The community that once gossiped about them now saw them as their own. One cold January night, as the snow fell hard, Sarah gave birth to their son. It was a long and difficult labor. Jack was terrified of losing someone he loved again. But Sarah was a fighter. When the sun came up, she placed a squalling baby boy in his arms. Thomas Jack Mercer, Tommy. Jack looked at his son, this little piece of them both, and cried. Emma crowded in to see her new baby brother. They had done it. They had built a family. The years that followed were good ones. Life on the frontier was never easy, but it was full. Tommy grew into a strong boy, and Emma grew into a kind young woman who wanted to be a teacher. Sarah became the rock of their community, and Jack, well, he learned how to laugh again. He learned that love was not about hiding from the world, but about building a life worth living, right in the middle of it. Some folks would call a man a fool for trading $200,000 for a widow and her little girl found half gone on the sun-scorched plains. But 5 years on, as Jack Mercer watched the Texas sun rise from his porch, he knew he'd made the best deal of his life. That single choice to stop for a child's cry taught him that real wealth isn't what you have, but who you have to hold on to. If you've ever felt like you're all alone, this story is for you. Sarah came out and stood beside him, the morning chill barely touching them. She looked at him, her eyes holding the memory of that terrible day. 5 years, Jack, she said softly. He nodded. Sometimes feels like a lifetime. Other times, just a blink. She smiled a little. Any regrets about the money? He thought about the quiet life he'd lost, the solitude he used to crave. Not a one, he said, pulling her close. My only regret is that I didn't find y'all sooner. Sarah's smile faded and she got real serious. Jack, I have to tell you something. That day when I thought my time was up, I prayed. Not for me, but for Emma. I asked God to send someone to keep her safe. Her voice got thick with emotion. And then, out of all that heat and emptiness, you appeared. You, with your tough-as-nails look and your gentle hands. You were the answer to a mother's prayer. Jack felt a lump form in his own throat. I'm no angel, Sarah. She shook her head, taking his hands in hers. I never said you were. But you are a good man, Jack Mercer. Good where it counts. You saved us that day, and you've been saving us every day since. You gave us a home when we had nothing and fought for us when we were too weak to fight for ourselves. She stood on her toes and kissed him, quieting whatever argument he was about to make. When she pulled away, she was smiling through a few tears. Now, no arguments. Just take the thank you. All right, he managed to say, his voice rough. He tucked her head under his chin. But you ought to know. You and Emma saved me right back. I was just taking up space before y'all came along. You taught me how to live again. From inside, they heard little Tommy start to fuss, and Emma's sleepy voice cooing at him, the sounds of a real family. Jack thought about the man he used to be, all walled off and certain he was done with happiness. That man would have just kept on riding. But he didn't. He made a choice to turn his horse toward a sound he could have ignored. He chose to help instead of turning away. And that one small decision changed everything. Sarah tugged his hand. Come on, Cowboy. Tommy's hungry. and Emma will be wanting breakfast. Jack followed her into the warm, happy mess of their home. The door shut behind them, closing out the vast, empty plains. But the world didn't feel empty to Jack anymore. It felt full of promise. They had built a life from wreckage and sorrow, two broken people who found a way to be whole together. Their victory wasn't some court case or a pile of money. It was this, the simple, everyday miracle of breakfast, of Emma's questions and Tommy's gurgles. When Jack Mercer chose to stop that day, he thought he was saving two lives. He never figured they'd be the ones to save him right back. He looked at his family around the table and knew with a certainty that settled deep in his bones that he was right where he was supposed to be. Home was not the ranch. It was the people. It was the love that filled every room. And that was more than enough. It was everything. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.